The committee of the whole is back in order. Colleagues, we are now on chapter 11. No, we finished chapter 11 and closed it. We are in chapter 12. We will take a 1-minute recess to be able to distribute the floor amendments. The committee of the whole is back in order. Colleagues, we are on chapter 12. Any comments? Okay, we will go to the floor amendments. The first floor amendment is TMT.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, have you had a chance to look at all the amendments?
I have.
Okay, and there are some amendments that haven't had a public hearing, and they aim to change law, public law without a public hearing.
Yes.
I believe we do have standing rules that if it's not associated with the funding, that they would need a public hearing.
Yes, I have several that I will rule out of order, but Senator, if you will bring that to the attention as we get to them. We put them in as they were entered, and they will, like the process, as you've asked, we rule them out of order as they go, and if somebody brings something up, we put all the FAs in, and we will debate them, or the body can choose. Right? Yes.
Before we go to the amendments, can we have a round of questions for OFB regarding this chapter?
Sure. I don't think there's any appropriations in here, but no problem. We'll bring them in. 1 minute recess. The Legislators Committee of the Whole is back in order. Senator Chala, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to confirm with OFB that almost everything prior to page 165 is the same as last year, or were there any changes?
We should just ask about the whole chapter.
Yeah. Senator, there's various miscellaneous provisions in there, but probably the majority are still there. To compare it side by side, it would be difficult to do, but we can do it. But for right now, we didn't do that.
Well, I didn't review word for word, but I looked at the paragraphs and they look similar to what have been in previous, except starting on the bottom of page 165, that's brand new, a reversionary clause, but that looks like it's just technical correction. That's fine with me. But for example, on page 166, there's a whole brand new section, and it's changing the cap on tax credits for the GMH program from $500,000 a year to, it's just removing that annual cap and leaving it of $5 million over a 5-year period. And I want to know why are we doing that? I don't remember a public hearing in that regard.
Yes, Senator, on this particular provision, I think this was discussed with the committee and was agreed by the committee to make the change from the 500,000 to a million.
Yeah, but why? Is there one contractor trying to avail of these tax credits who wants to exceed the $500,000 limit?
I believe in consultation with the hospital, I think this is something that they agreed to do.
Because I remember reading in the news that there was one contractor in the middle of trying to avail of these tax credits, and I feel like we're going in there right now in the middle of it without a public hearing and tinkering with it for one person's benefit again. And I am very, without having a hearing on that or a GMH in here, that's what it feels like we're doing here. Not necessarily. It may benefit GMH, yes, but it looks like we're trying to particularly accommodate one person or contractor. The next one is new also, this limited procurement for OTEC. And then the public disclosure of professional services for these agencies, I have no problem with that. I'm glad you put that in there. Department of Public Health to procure legal and investigative service. This is new. This is very new, right? There was no bill or hearing on this. Every agency wants to have counsel. The problem is, you know, we have a central counsel system, just like we have a central finance system and a central hiring system. And the more we take these things out of the central system, the more we end up with inconsistent services or opinions or whatever. It doesn't say, it just says legal and investigative services, but it's not really specific. Like maybe if it was a specialized investigation for particular, you know, like EPA, they want specialized knowledge for what they're doing there, hazardous waste law, things like this. But it's not really clear here what this is for. On page, the others I don't have a problem with, but this, the reporting especially, I'm glad the increased reporting is in here. But then we go to page 169, 170, 171. These are all regarding this foreign medical graduates licensure rules and regulations. Is this pursuant to a particular bill?
Point of information, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please provide information. Yes.
Yep. This particular area here is just to correct some citations that were wrong. It did have a public hearing. It was on, I believe, Bill number 303. Yes, Bill 303. And it's just to correct the citations. So also, we also included, you know, a timeline for them to do their rules and regulations too as well.
All right, thank you. And then on page 171, it seems to be changing the GVB rules again as to who will be a member of GVB. This is a significant change. Is this again pursuant to a bill with a public hearing?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
I'm looking for a point of information, yes.
Oh, okay.
Please. Please
So
proceed.
that being said, it wasn't a bill that was introduced in this term, no, it wasn't, but it was a bill that had been previously introduced and discussed in the I believe it was the 36th Guam Legislature that we had discussed this prior. I mean, the 37th Guam Legislature to discuss this prior. Conversations were brought up while GVB was in hearings and oversights with this concern in mind. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, all right. And so I just want to read this out because those people who have a vested interest might be interested to know that they are striking from the GVB law that contributing members may acquire multiple voting rights on the basis of one vote for each annual contribution of $100, and that contributing members may be present and may vote by proxy. They're striking all of that out. And that elections of directors by the membership, each member who has acquired the right to cast votes at such election shall cast as many votes as the member has acquired for each of the 4 candidates. They're striking that out. They're adding a financial disclosure for GVB. And then it says governance reform for GVB, that they're going to vote confidentially for that 12th director, it looks like.
Again, point of information, just to clarify it.
Yes, I'd like a point of information.
Thank you. The latter part that was talked about, confidentiality, is to allow the individual who's making the vote not be provided a number, because when they go in to vote, they're given a number and their names are written next to that number. So you can actually identify how this individual had voted for on a particular. So it gives the discretion, not the discretion, but the privacy of an individual voting for a candidate without being recognized who they are. It's like in the election, you might as well, just put your name on the ballot and then turn it in. So that's the change there. As far as the other ones that were mentioned, with regards to financial disclosure, we have individuals who work on the GVB board, and those individuals have access to $25 million a year. It's quite a big sum, and we've been trying for years to get this financials from these individuals. The other section about the proxies, no longer can we have proxies. We make this fair. One person, one vote. Not coming into these voting blocks with 230 votes in their pocket because they were able to get proxies from other people. No, it's if you're there, you vote, just like you do in this regular election. One vote, one person. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. To the body as well. These were by request of the committees, and I don't see any amendments to strike. If you want to strike on the floor, you can attempt that. But there's no amendments right now on the drive to strike with all these observations. I've asked you to review the budget. Now it's going on 15 days. There's not one amendment in here to strike. Thank you.
All right.
I don't know. OFB, tell us what the investigative for, they're going to procure, is this for HPLO, for public health, to procure legal and investigative services? Is this for the HPLO, the licensing offices, or somewhere else in public health?
I will seek point of information from the chair. Does the chair yield for health?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but that was not an amendment that I had proffered in this budget. Thank you.
Okay. To whomever has proffered this as request of the committee, can you yield to the question, I'm looking for a point of information? Thank you. Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and to the proffer of the question, I don't believe I proffered this amendment. However, we've heard countless times from HPLO where they lacked legal services to move these investigations forward, as well as the biggest issue they have is trying to hire I think it was mine. Yeah, hire investigators to do the research that's needed. So I believe that they needed to have this to give them the ability to do so. So we incorporated into the budget so that HPLO under the Department of Public Health and Social Services will be able to now be able to seek out an investigator as well as an attorney.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you. Anyone else? Opening comments on the chapter. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
So just want to see, Mr. Chair, I just had a question on a previous chapter. You had ruled a section out of order, and I believe it was the Guam Visitors Bureau study.
That's correct.
And what was the basis for ruling it out of order?
The basis was that it was not a bill and did not have a public hearing.
So I just asked that you be consistent with your rulings. That wasn't an amendment that was proffered. That was in the substance of the bill. And as the retiring speaker had raised, it appears there are other sections included in the bill that represent new items that have not been publicly heard, Mr. Chair. So I just ask on behalf of the body that you remain consistent in the application of that standard that you used to previously rule the Guam Visitors Bureau study section out of order.
Yes, that was an appropriation, Senator, so that's correct. As an appropriation, it was out of order. However, these are miscellaneous provisions, which I can tell you, I'll go back and get you a list. It's common for the committee to accept committee recommendations for language. If you review the budget and you see the changes and don't like them, that's where you're supposed to proffer an amendment to delete it. But definitely for appropriations, you're absolutely correct. But we are on the correct chapter of provisions where the committee did extend courtesy to the committees of jurisdiction. On the chapter 12. Okay, we will now move to the floor amendments. On the floor amendments, we start with the first one. It is SB 266 TMT P174. Senator Chalai, you're recognized.
Mrs. Masi, this is an amendment to restore the gas tax relief, which lifts the gas tax for the fiscal year and saves customers at the pump 19 cents a gallon. This relief has been already factored into the amount of the Guam Highway Fund in this budget, according to BBMR. So there's no fiscal impact to giving this relief. This year they had already planned for it. So I think OFB as well had already planned for that. So I would like to extend this gas tax relief. I think it's a timely time to do that, and not timely to discontinue that while we have increase in fuel for power rates, and of course all the costs associated with these storms that we've been having.
That's correct. Thank you, Senator, for proffering it. As you said, it has been contemplated in the provisions for revenue, so it's not. It just needed the language. Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I stand in full support of this amendment proffered by the senator who is continuing to ensure that this tax relief, who's been an advocate from day one, actually, when it comes to this this relief for our people at the pumps, and knowing that there is no financial impact. I just wanted to verify with you, Mr. Chair, that there is no financial impact on this, that it's already been calculated. And do you know what that number is, though?
I don't know the number, Senator, but it was part of the revenues presentation, and BBMR and OFB did openly concur that it's been recognized in revenues, but it was language. But I don't know the number exactly.
Okay, I'll just go back and to that chapter and look at it. Okay,
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I stand in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, any objections to the amendment? Amendment passes. Senator Gumatauto, could you please proffer this amendment? For me, it is also a technical amendment, once again, to the budget that was discussed in Chapter 1 as a technical amendment.
Mr. Chair, this is a CMD L1-7P169.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, colleagues, as talked about at the very beginning of this is a technical amendment, line 1 through 7, page 169, to amend Section 41 to Chapter 12, miscellaneous provision, to read Section 41, Guam Criminal Law and Procedure Review Commission, Section 25.03C of Title I Guam Code annotated is hereby amended to read. That was a change, it was a strike through of 2506. Also to section or of C of the same section, at the conclusion of its review, the Commission shall submit comprehensive criminal code reform recommendations to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Guam, E. Magahagan Guahan, and the Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan by September 30, 2027. Again, this is asking the Clerk's Legal and Office of Finance and Budget to make any technical corrections. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Correct. So that's a line through within 48 hours, or 48 months, excuse me, of the initial meeting. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Amendment passes. Next amendment is SB 266, SSM L26, P168, and it's proffered by Senator Montanani. Senator Montanani, you're recognized.
Which one is this one? I'm sorry.
This
My-
is
my amendments are out of
L26. Yeah,
order.
so this is the one to sub-article A, Chapter 1, or Article 1, Chapter 5, the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, advance payment. L26 P168.
Okay.
P as in-
I have it. Okay. Yes, this is also a technical amendment. All it does is on page 168, line 26, the word pharmaceuticals was supposed to be crossed out.
Okay.
And all the amendments that I am proffering today were brought up during the budget oversight hearings with the Guam Memorial Hospital.
Okay. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Amendment passes.
I was
The next-
raising my hand. I was raising my hand.
Oh, sorry about that. I will rule it back in order. Go ahead, Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. I think, again, my concern about with advance payments, well, first of all, let me ask a question to the proffer of this, I guess, the context of this particular section. So although it was discussed in an oversight hearing, it doesn't give notice to the rest of the public in regards to potential impacts. So with advance payments, what is the intent of this particular, I guess, section? Because my understanding is that advance payments are used for off-island vendors, and we know that GMH has a long waiting list of payables for local vendors. And one of the issues with GMH and their procurement is, you know, if we don't fix their current procurement, what's happening, it's just, we don't fix the root of the problem, it's going to exacerbate the problem. And if we're, by not addressing the payables, it really puts the local vendors at a disadvantage. And it would favor, it would provide more, a favorable purchasing power of off-island vendors. And I understand that we need we need to expand the widest net to get the best cost. But if we don't fix the current problem of, paying off the payables, I think that needs to happen first before we move to advance payments. So if the author of this particular section can provide a little bit more context, I appreciate it.
Senator, do you yield?
Sure, I can explain a little bit. Again, this is from the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. They brought this up during their budget oversight hearing. And I'm not sure if the senator attended even their oversight hearing at the hospital. Guam Memorial Hospital has been making major strides in terms of their accounts payable, in terms of several different improvements at GMH, and they're also have active RFPs, revenue cycle management. They're planning on outsourcing their skilled nursing facility, or not outsourcing, but leasing out the facility, housekeeping, dietary services, security. So they're doing the best they can with their finances. But for this particular amendment, while law generally prohibits payment before goods are received, this exemption would expand on an earlier exemption, which was found to be too narrow. And it applies only to GMH. And so the problem that it solves, supply chains beyond pharmaceuticals do not work like ordinary government purchasing. Manufacturers of heavy equipment, like the sole repair of the hospital's existing standby generators and distributors of many, require payment in advance before they perform the work or will ship the pharmaceutical. A government rule that forbids advance payment leaves the hospital unable to transact with these suppliers on the terms the market actually offers. And for GMH, the consequences, they are acute. Guam is thousands of miles from mainland distribution hubs. Shipping lead times are already long before any payment delay is added. When a supplier will only ship on prepayment, a pay-on-receipt rule does not protect the government. It simply stops the order, forcing the hospital toward more expensive alternatives or leaving a gap. Drug shortages and allocation are a national reality. Vendors prioritize buyers who can transact quickly and on standard terms. It supports the hospital in terms of continuity of operations. It removes a legal barrier that can stand between performing the necessary repairs on critical equipment or patients getting the medicines they need, and so forth.
So does that answer your question, Senator Perez?
I understand the intent, and I support, ways to facilitate procurement. It's just, again, there wasn't any notice to the general public in regards to this change in law. And so I'm just concerned that by expanding it to other things, the public has not weighed in on this, although we hear from the hospital. I just, I don't know the full impact, having not heard from the other parts of the community. So I just want to register my concern.
On the amendment, anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? Hearing none, is there any objection to the amendment? Amendment carries. The next amendment is, colleagues, SSM L10 P174. Senator Montanani, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment updates the small purchase threshold for GMH. Again, this was an item that was brought up during the budget oversight with the hospital. Today, the hospital's small purchase ceiling is fixed at $250,000. That is a number that hasn't moved in years. This amendment ties it instead to the federal simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $350,000 and is reviewed on a set federal schedule. Now, why does this matter? Because our hospital runs 24 hours a day and cannot pause patient care while a routine purchase grinds through a full sealed bid solicitation. A single piece of biomedical equipment, a service contract, or a bulk pharmaceutical order can exceed $250,000 and still be an ordinary operating expense for a hospital. When those purchases are forced into lengthy formal bids, supplies get delayed, competition actually shrinks because island vendors won't sit through the paperwork, and the hospital ends up leaning on the emergency and sole source purchases our auditors criticize most. This amendment fixes that, but it is not a blank check. It requires GMH to seek at least 3 written quotes wherever practicable, to document every solicitation, to attest to its outreach, and to report every quarter to the Speaker. It expressly forbids splitting purchases to duck the threshold, and by tying our number to the federal standard, we stay aligned with what federal grantors already expect without returning to this body every time the federal figure is adjusted. In terms of the fiscal effects on this budget, there's none. This amendment does not appropriate a single dollar. It does not increase the hospital spending authority by 1 cent. It changes how the hospital buys, not how much it may spend. So every dollar the hospital obligates still comes from funds already appropriated to it in this amendment.
On
And
the
again,
amendment.
the Guam Memorial Hospital has repeatedly come to the legislature as well as to the committee asking for tools to help them. And so this is another tool that they've requested.
On the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Senator Perez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, have concerns with this particular amendment. We did have a hearing on a different bill in regards to increasing the small purchase threshold. And during that, in the testimony that was provided by DOA, they did actually they had collected some data on how much would be a reasonable threshold level. So right now, the small purchase level for goods and services is $25,000. According to their data, they recommend $50,000 be the threshold. Now, when it comes to the hospital, there hasn't been any data regarding what is the average amount that they procure. And so I think that more information is needed in order to determine that level. When it comes to federal funding, of course, we can always fall back, the hospital can always fall back on this, the level of what is the federal simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $250,000. And so I don't think there is a need for this particular amendment because they're covered if it's federal funds. I would like to caution that if we're going to go to a higher amount without any supporting information, what potentially could happen is that we are going to inflate the cost of government. Because if vendors see that the cost is higher, they may price higher. So that's surveillance. It's called surveillance pricing. Even though there are certain safeguards like artificial division, no artificial division, which is one of the issues with small purchases. And the other issue with this particular amendment is that we could see the increase in the small threshold without local input based on what the federal government is doing. So again, there's that lack of transparency. When we're talking about, procurement, it's really critical that we have transparency in our laws. And so for these reasons, I respectfully object to this amendment.
On the amendment, any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Chalai, you're recognized.
Yeah, I agree with the previous speaker and that we should proceed with caution, at least with a public hearing specifically on this so that vendors can weigh in, because by changing the amount of the threshold, it changes the method of procurement that is allowed and potentially reduces competition for it. And the way that they have to send out notice. So for small purchases under this threshold amount, they would just have to get 3 quotes or even less than that if they can't get 3 quotes versus for, making a public notice and a public announcement for it. So for that reason, and just because it hasn't had a specific hearing, I would like to have that, and I'd like to hear DOA's take on this as well as the hospitals. And yeah, because I think allowing this is going to have implications that we're not considering today. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator Gumatauto.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I absolutely rise in support of the amendment. Some benefits to, especially on the use of federal funds in pushing these procurements out. I did sit in the oversight hearings, both here and at the Guam Memorial Hospital, visited and toured, and understand their needs. And I think all of us should get behind efforts to allow them more tools to be able to procure items to be used, whether it's pharmaceuticals or medical supplies. Again, we have a very limited pool of suppliers that can bring items to Guam. And in the past, over the last 30 years, we've found every single way to try to leverage partnerships to bring either the right tools, the right supplies needed to administer healthcare at our only civilian hospital. So I do rise in support of it, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment, anybody else wish to speak? Speaker Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just the author of the amendment can yield to a question, and the question is, what is the federal simplified acquisition threshold?
Senator, do you yield?
It's 350,000.
Pardon me?
350,000?
350,000.
Right.
Okay. That's just, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Anybody else on the amendment? Would the proffer like to close?
Sorry, I was raising.
Oh,
yeah, sorry.
you had already raised, you already spoken
go
on the
ahead.
amendment,
Yeah,
Senator
I
Paris?
was just going to raise a point of order that this be rolled out of order based on the fact that there was no public hearing for this particular section, but I know Senator Parkinson has something.
Yes, Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in support of this amendment. I myself have a similar amendment that is a little bit more broad than this, not just GMH, but it's kind of across the board. So as a general principle, I support this bill. I think that, you know, with the way prices have gone up so significantly in the last 10, 20 years with massive inflation, I think it's time for us to have a readjustment on what these floors need to be, not just for GMH, but across the board for the entire government. If we're saying that this is good governance for GMH, I'm on board with that. But it also means this is good governance for other places too. Because if we are allowing this for certain agencies and not agencies, then we're just as guilty of being in the business of picking winners and losers among the agencies by not giving them the same parity in their ability to procure services. And so I stand in support of this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to also support a later amendment that attempts to do the same thing. That yield the rest of my time, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment, anyone else wish to speak on the amendment?
So,
Yes.
I would raise the same point of order. I don't think you've ruled on it, that this is out of order, because no matter the intention and the discussions that might have been had on it, the public has not heard anything about us doing this for GMH. And like I said, this has the potential to impact vendors here, whether they are going to be included or noticed even in this kind of procurements or not. And I think we could make sure that we at least give them notice before we do this today.
So
And that's what our rules require. It's not even a rule. It's 2 GCA 2108. It's a law. It mandates that even in the budget bill, no unrelated items be attached unless they've had a public hearing.
We are in provisions. I've ruled that it is eligible. Would you like to close, Senator?
I'll just say that, you know, again, this is a tool to help the Guam Memorial Hospital. This is our opportunity to help the Guam Memorial Hospital. In terms of transparency, there is a reporting requirement to the speaker where the public can actually look at the documents that are available. And as I mentioned earlier, this would not increase the burden on the government. Local vendors still have a local procurement preference for all purchases. So I humbly ask for my colleagues to support this amendment. It's going to help GMH. Thanks.
On the amendment, there has been an objection. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment passes. Colleagues, we are on SB 266 SSM P174. I am going to rule this out of order as it is affecting revenues and there's no way to adjust Chapter 1. Out of order. Colleagues, we are now on Amendment SB 266 SSM P174-2. Senator Montanari, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is about giving GMH again another tool to save time, save money, and get critical medical supplies into the hands of our healthcare professionals faster. Now, under current Guam law, if another state has already completed a competitive bidding process and negotiated a great price for medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, or supplies, the hospital generally has to start all over and conduct its own procurement, even though another government has already completed a competitive solicitation. This amendment simply allows the hospital to piggyback or join those existing competitively awarded contracts, just as many other government agencies across the country already do. But here is the important point that I hope my colleagues will consider, that this is not a new concept for Guam. Years ago, this legislature passed legislation allowing the Women, Infants, and Children, the WIC program, and the Bureau of Economic Security within the Department of Public Health to join contracts from other states. That bill was signed into law by the governor and is now codified in 5 GCA subsection 5126. More recently, the legislature extended the same authority to the Division of Public Welfare through 5 GCA subsection 5126.1. So what we're asking today is simple. If this procurement authority is good enough for public health programs and that purchase food, public assistance services, and other essential goods, why shouldn't Guam Memorial Hospital, our island's only public hospital, have the very same tool to purchase medicines, medical equipment, and life-saving supplies? This amendment, it does not eliminate competition. The competition has already happened. Another government has already publicly bid the contract. The hospital's contracting officer must still certify in writing that the contract resulted from a competitive procurement process. The vendor must agree to allow the hospital to participate, and the hospital remains responsible for its own obligations under that contract. This amendment does not appropriate one additional dollar. It doesn't increase spending authority. It simply allows the hospital to take advantage of pricing and contracts that have already been competitively negotiated instead of spending months repeating work that has already been done.
Thank you. On the amendment, Senator Ranking Member Tina Rose Muñoz-Barnes, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to rise in support of this amendment, and this is a very good amendment. We've seen the successes just recently, working closely with public health, and what better way than to jump on board as we are a jurisdiction of the United States and can jump onto the bandwagon for this. So I support this amendment wholeheartedly, and I thank the good author of this amendment for proffering it today. Senator Masi.
Masi. On the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I think this amendment should be out of order. It requires a public hearing. And just, I know there was a bill that was passed last term that used the same language for the Division of Public Welfare. And the reason why I didn't support it is because it lacks transparency and accountability of vital taxpayer dollars. You know, as a government, we need to exercise due diligence to ensure that the contracts government of Guam enters into is fully vetted, even with apparent benefits. And we need to ensure that GMH clearly identifies the needs, terms and conditions, deliverables, and does the market research of available options to determine the best value in meeting those needs. Market research is the best practice that supports the contracting officer must determine in writing that the other jurisdiction contract has gone through a competitive procurement process. Additionally, specifications that are not fully developed can lead to additional avoidable charges due to change orders that market research can prevent. Another issue, it lacks the requirements pertaining to the cost of and reimbursement. It exempts procurement from the cost and reimbursement regulations and oversight of the AG for procurement over $500,000. Additionally, it does not contain a cap for expenditure of public funds or the requirement for sufficient funding to be available. It is critical the limited public funds that safeguards are in place to ensure contracts are sufficiently reviewed to ensure fiduciary responsibility and to avoid financial liability. Other issues is that it exempts the safeguards of an expenditure of public funds, such as ethical practices, procurement competency, procurement record, review of the procurement record by the public, review of audits by the public auditor, compliance with federal requirements. Without these safeguards, remedies in the event of a failure of a cooperative contract may be lacking to protect the public interests and funds in spite of good intentions and said benefits. And so this particular amendment is opening the door for shenanigans. What we really need to do is vet this. And from my review of how it's used by Division of Public Welfare, it's used for contracts outside of what it was meant for. When that bill was introduced, the stated purpose was to be compliant with Medicaid protocols. The first thing that was procured was consultancy, not Medicaid IT compliance. And so we're already seeing a diversion, a deviance in how this particular wording is used or misused. So I rise in objection to this amendment because it opens the door for lack of transparency and misuse of public funds. And I'm already seeing signs of its misuse. If we want a good bill, let's have a public hearing. Let's not hide behind, these are tools. Yes, they are tools, but they're only as good as we can protect the public trust. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator Talal, you're recognized.
Yeah, first I'd like to raise a point of order that this amendment should be ruled out of order because it violates 2 GCA 2108, which says that unrelated subjects on an annual budget bill or supplement shall be the same subject matter as a bill which has been discussed at a duly noticed public hearing unless the public hearing is waived due to emergencies. And we know that there wasn't a public hearing on this bill, even though it might have been talked about during an oversight hearing. But what we really need is notice to people who are in this industry, people who are vendors to the hospital, people who are potentially locked out if the hospital decides to procure service from some other state. And the hospital has not, the bill or this amendment has not specified exactly which services the hospital is going to avail of. And I think that should be one of the things that gets vetted in a public hearing. Is it for every service available to the hospital or just a particular one, like public health was supposed to do? Something where we can benefit from interstate coordination. Otherwise, it locks out local procurement. It locks out competition among local vendors. It and that is on the sole discretion of someone at GMH. And that would be pursuant to this being passed in a hidden section of the budget bill. It just, if it's a good tool, then it would withstand scrutiny, just like the others. They were good bills, especially if they were used as intended, excellent bills. They would help public health in areas that were not available to them here on Guam. And if we could get a bill that specifies what service is going to be, how this is going to affect local procurement, and we can hear from them, and they don't object, and how it will benefit GMH particularly, then of course, that's what the purpose of a public hearing is. And I think this is just, if it's a good idea, it can withstand the scrutiny of a public hearing, and we can take the effort to write the bill up, introduce it, and have a hearing on it. That can be done in a month. And I think that that would be worth it versus locking all of local companies out of this procurement in favor of companies in other states per competition that has been done in another state among other companies, ours not included. That's the difference. And so that's why I think we should just at least respect that, let them weigh in. But more importantly, I think we should follow our own laws where we say we're not going to do this anymore, putting all these unrelated items into a budget bill, changing the laws while we are purporting to just change the amounts of appropriations for the next fiscal year. If we want to change the laws in these significant ways, then our laws require that we have a public hearing, unless it's an emergency, but that we have a public hearing on a bill. And I haven't seen anybody make any law that says we're going to waive this existing law, 2 GCA 2108. Just like we don't waive criminal laws in here unless we do it by a statute. So I think this should be ruled out of order, Mr. Chair. That's my point of order.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, on the motion.
It's a point of order, Mr. Chair.
On the motion. So on your point of order, as is customary in provisions and has been, I leave it to the will of the body, so I rule it being still in order. Senator
You're
Martinani,
ruling that it's in order to violate 2 GCA 2108?
I rule that it's in provisions and it's eligible for movement and leave it to the will of the
But
body.
the point of order is that it violates a very specific statute, 2 GCA 2108. So please rule whether you think this violates 2 GCA 2108, that it's a subject of a bill that has had a public hearing or not. That's really the only choices we have.
In the provisions section, I rule that it is eligible.
That this
Yes.
meets this requirement, that is the same subject matter as a bill
Point
which
of
has
order,
been
point of
discussed
order,
at a
Mr. Chair.
duly noticed public hearing.
Point of order.
Yes, I recognize your point of order.
Thank you. Let me go back to Mason, Section 122, breaches of the order of the House. Again, number 3, a member who resorts to persistent irrelevance or to persistent repetition after the attention of the House has been called to the matter may be directed to discontinue the speech by the presiding officer. Mr. Chair, just wanting to get back in order. Thank you.
Thank you. So I rule the amendment is in order in provisions. Any other senator wish to
Sorry,
speak?
I ruled to
Yes.
overrule the chair.
Okay, there's a motion to overrule the chair. All those in favor of overruling the chair, please indicate by raising your hand.
It violates our own law.
Motion fails. Any senator on the motion? Yes. This is a motion.
On the motion, I object to this provision. It might be a tool for GMH, but it is a tool that has not had a public hearing. It is a tool that no one could be bothered to write a bill and invite the public to weigh in on. It has a tool that has very significant impacts, potentially, because there are no parameters listed in this section, as there were in previous bills where we very specifically authorized public health to avail of certain contractual needs in partnership with other states and other procurement. and where we locked out the ability of local contractors to compete. And I think anytime you're going to do that, doesn't it just make common sense that you would want them to weigh in? And there is no reason we can't do that. We can do that in 1 month, 30 days, if you just put in a bill, have a hearing, and invite them. Give them notice. The very basics of transparency. The very basics of our jobs. It's not our job to come in here to the legislature and say, oh, we like this idea, let's pass it. Nowhere are they allowed to do that. It's our job to come in here and have to go through the work of introducing a bill, holding a hearing, and our law requires notice to the public, notice to those we know for sure are potentially impacted. And again, it's an easy thing to do because that's our job. And what's very perplexing is that we have more than 8 people in here who are willing to say, disregard the laws of Guam, disregard the open government law, disregard the law that requires that you don't put riders on bills, you don't put on unrelated bills unless you've had a public hearing. They did this because other legislatures were acting like this, that during budget times they could throw in anything. They used to call it Christmas tree time. And this was very, very specific when they outlawed that. And yes, we can change the law so that that's no longer a prohibition, but no one has changed that law, and that continues to be a prohibition on us. And I don't know anyone who came in here and said, who swore they were going to not abide by the laws of Guam, because our oath is we are going to abide by the laws of Guam. That we are going to not put in unrelated matters on a budget bill. So even though you like this provision, GMH likes this provision, it can wait 30 days. And we can hear what the other contractors have to say. And I think we should hear from GMH exactly how they intend to use this. Is it for an EHR system? Is it for every system in the hospital that has current vendors? That's really what we need to know. And I think all of you should be equally concerned. It's all of our jobs to be transparent. It's all of our jobs to follow the open government law. It's all of our jobs to be fair to competitors, vendors, businesses on Guam. That's what would make Guam more attractive to business. If we were fair, if we could follow our own laws and not make exceptions for specific people, especially without any public hearing or public notice. When those previous bills, laws that were cited, yes, they became law because we vetted it. And that's all that needs to happen here. It just needs to be vetted. And when in those laws, we put down some parameters. And we listened to anyone who wanted to come in and talk during the public hearings and to tell us what impact this might have on them. And to do this without listening is, you know, in a nice words, a disservice to the people of Guam, but it's actually very arrogant. Thank you.
On the motion, anyone else wish to speak on the motion? Senator Burnett, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, but transparency's taken a big hit in this budget session, going back to the very beginning of it. The retiring speaker is absolutely correct. it's the basics of what we do. First things first, we adhere to the public notice requirements and the open government law. But when that point was raised in this session, the response we got was that we have these Organic Act superpowers and we don't have to follow the law that we've followed for every other session that we've had in this 38th legislature and the previous one, going back as far as I can remember. And when they didn't follow the open government law or the public notice requirements or the requirement that a bill has to have a public hearing, it was news. And it was news reported on by some of my colleagues in this hall who are now serving as duly elected representatives of the people. I get it. You know, we want to give the agencies tools. Sometimes we give them a tool, sometimes we give them 2 tools, sometimes we give them the toolbox. In some agencies, we're giving them the whole hardware store. But when we do that, we have to give our people a heads up. It's just the first order of business to let the people who put us in this hall know that we're going to discuss these ideas. And we'd like not just your input, but the input of anybody who's relevant to the subject at hand, anybody who might be impacted, anyone who supports it or opposes it. And it's pretty wild that we're explaining these very basic and simple concepts because, again, like the retiring speaker had said, there's more than a majority of members in this House who don't think transparency is important, who don't think that the most basic first things first thing that we do is important. Even if if a senator thinks an idea is great, that's great, but it's still got to be vetted. We still have to have input provided. We still have to go through the process. And we haven't really been doing that in this term under this majority's leadership and during this budget process, where again, we heard in the beginning that we got the power. We're power tripping. We don't have to follow the law. Now we're here today that the good chairman of finance with the bang of a gavel can not just break the law, but say that it's okay to do so and just please proceed. And we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of that rule by gang. Just because the majority rules doesn't mean that the majority is right. And in this case, and the case of how we open this session, based on the basics, the majority is absolutely wrong. Wrong to say that this session was duly noticed in accordance with the open government law, and wrong to say that we can break the laws on the books, that we don't have to have a public hearing. That we can just do what we want because we have the power. When in reality, it's the people who have the power. And it's disrespectful to abuse the responsibility they have given all of us to serve them with respect and to follow the laws of Guam. Si Dios Masi, Mr. Chair.
On the motion, anyone else wish to speak on the motion?
Do I get to close?
Yes, you will get to close. Anybody else on the motion? Mr. Speaker, you're recognized on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We didn't break any rules. Things were duly noted. And yes, 12 is greater than 3. Okay. But I'm not going to digress. I'm going to keep my comments to the matter at hand, this amendment. Just as the author could yield to a question, and the question that I have for the author is, was this an amendment as a result of any conversation or a multitude of conversations that have been had publicly with the Guam Memorial Hospital?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, during the budget hearing, which is, I think, a public hearing, right, on a budget which we are debating is a budget bill in public before the people, the community. It was, again, public. I'm not sure if all senators attended, but it was a public hearing on the budget bill where we were discussing GMH and where GMH did discuss this and proffered and helped with these amendments based on that hearing, you know, public hearing on the budget, the bill.
Thank you. And I guess another question that I would like to proffer, if the author can so yield, is this been a conversation that you know of that has been happening more than one time, and as far as an idea to be able to maximize the buying power for the Guam Memorial Hospital?
Author yield.
I personally haven't had any conversations with GMH on this, but they have noted an example where this has been effective and implemented at the Department of Public Health and Social Services. It is not a new concept.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Senator Gumatato, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems it has taken just over 16 years for a tool like this to get to the Guam Memorial Hospital. It seems like it was not like yesterday, but over the years, GMH has always struggled to try to find ways and more creative ways, modern ways, to bring more and more resources to its operations. I know at the time, it might have seemed even more than 20 years ago. There was discussions asking, hey, can you make payments, help out? Went to public health to make payments. It was a big turnaround at some point that led to the actual accreditation of the Guam Memorial Hospital. And then things kind of went off the rails, if you will. But 16 years, all the health committee chairs, all the health committees perhaps had this in front of them, but chose other policies, which is fair. We're here now. You know, I stand in support of the amendment. And I believe that, as you ruled correctly, I don't know how many times we've seen it in this session, stuff that did not go through public hearing, and in the last budget session, and you allowed the debate to happen. It didn't have enough votes, and again, that's how this whole thing, and the report, and sorry, the legislative journal will show that. But again, I stand in support of the amendment, and I continue to and ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the motion, anybody else wish to speak on the motion? Seeing hearing none, before I have you close, Senator, yes, thank you, Senator Gumatato. Even when I overrule things, it's the rule of the body, which is the democratic process. And it is any motion that goes to be decided on the floor is completely done by the rule of the body. Yes. Senator Matanani, you may close.
Senator, well, there was another senator who was
Yeah,
trying to speak?
she's already spoken on the motion. Please
Okay.
close on your motion.
Thank you. I will just say that I know that one of my colleagues was talking about just because it sounds good, it doesn't, doesn't mean that it's right. But just because you're loud and you talk so much and you make so much noise, it doesn't mean that you're right. And I will say again that there was a budget hearing, an oversight hearing on the budget, GMH budget. It was public. There was no hiding, there was none of that. And the amendments that we're proffering are based on the input that was received during that hearing, which was public, which was with the Guam Memorial Hospital. And I have been listening to the Guam Memorial Hospital. This is, in the last 18 months, this is the most improvements they have seen in the last 8 years. My goodness, they're water blasting. They haven't water blasted the Guam Memorial Hospital in the last 8 years, but they have in the last 18 months since this 38th Guam Legislature has been in office. This new leadership has been in office. So once again, I humbly ask for my colleagues' support in passing this amendment. Again, it is a tool to help GMH. Thank you.
On the motion, there has been an objection. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion carries.
I'll withdraw the next amendment, Mr. Chair.
The next amendment has been withdrawn. Clerk, you're good with that? Colleagues, we are now on Amendment SSM L11 P174. This is an appropriation measure, excess revenues. I'm going to rule it out of order. Colleagues, we are now on SB 266 TMT P174 III. Senator Tulai, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment to amend Public Law 38-102, Section 8, which that public law was in February 2026. It was affecting the appropriation for the Simon Sanchez High School, and it added the words where the appropriation was going for many years towards construction leaseback payments. It added the words and associated pre-development stage expenses. So this amendment would strike out those words that were added in February 2026, because as we know now, in February 26, which I don't think was very clear then, or that's giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, who proffered this amendment, that they were in active negotiations. They had already received responses to an RFP, and an RFP that was based on the law as it existed prior to this amendment. And
Mr. Chair, point of order. Can we get a copy? I don't think I have a copy of that amendment, sir.
if I could get my time back then, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Make sure that her time was not running during that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You may continue, Senator.
Thank you. And as we know, so this funding continues to exist out there, it seems, but it affects other parts of this law which cap the amount of financing at $166,365,000, and which caps that what the RFP is supposed to be for, the construction of and FF&E services for Simon Sanchez, and then specifically says that the responsibilities of the contractor are for all costs, expenses, fees associated with the civil improvements on-site and off-site, infrastructure, construction, demolition, permits, FF&E services, and financing associated with Simon Sanchez. So these words as we have heard in the tapes, allow extra payments outside of the leaseback as anticipated by the RFP. And I think that's, if that's the case, of course, they would not come in here and testify before us when we try to ask them. But if that's the case, then it really exceeds the cap that was previously mandated by law, and I think puts the whole procurement in question, and that removing these words is going to allow that Simon Sanchez procurement to proceed fairly as anticipated on the original RFP with any contractors involved.
Thank
It's
you,
my amendment.
Thank you, Senator Chulai. Senator Dueñas, you're recognized on the amendment.
Mr. Chair. I rise in support of the amendment, and I wanted to come down here to speak because I believe I need to clear the record on a lot of misinformation that has been floating in the ether. Mr. Chair, I was the mover of the amendment, and what had happened is during the discussion, and we can go back to the tapes, everyone on this floor was okay with this language. The language they weren't okay with was the financing mechanisms. And even today, Mr. Chair, we are in a pre-award situation for Simon Sanchez. And I made it clear when I questioned Mr. Carlson on the record what was the conditions under which they asked for this language. And when we were discussing the appropriation, which when they said there wasn't an appropriation for Simon Sanchez, but I'm glad my colleagues now agree that there is an appropriation for Simon Sanchez. This amendment shows me that there's an agreement now that there is an appropriation in the fiscal year 2026 for Simon Sanchez. Praise the Lord. All this speculation, all the boogeyman stuff from the front office, there's no appropriation. Well, my colleagues, thank you for acknowledging there's an appropriation, but what we need to do now is reverse ourselves from what everybody said they were okay with. The real discussion was financing mechanisms, which is available to every vendor, no matter what, because we are in the pre-award phase, meaning if the protest is held up and they go to the next bidder has the same opportunities. So for me, I'm glad we're going to clarify once and forever, because I agree that it has to be a determination on the law whether or not it's 30 years or 32 years. But Mr. Chair, this was not the topic of, and I'll tell you, I'll pull the tape up with many of the folks on the other side of the aisle saying, we would be okay, we could pass this right now. But, oh boy, you know, Mr. Dueñas here is trying to see if there can be some other financing mechanisms that even Gita said, yes, they're available for everyone, and codifying them is not a problem. I don't even see a provision to remove that here. What I see is a provision to move pre-construction costs, even for which, Mr. Chair, there cannot be any of that activity because there's no award. We could get in a bus right now and go up to Jigu, and I guarantee I won't say the other part. There's no mazamaking going on up there. There's no backhoe. There's no bulldozer. There was no ground broken to remove the current Simon Sanchez and construct. Nothing. Because there's TODSA award. And we know after watching the procedures from the public auditor discussion, they dismissed their hearing of that because they said, you're in the wrong place for relief. You have to wait for Public Works to make their decision on that procurement. Then we can move forward to address whether or not the protest was handled. But people of Guam, we are in pre-award for Simon Sanchez. So no boogeyman. There is an appropriation. And for those that, and I support it, to remove pre-construction, como award, come back and ask for pre-construction tanamazamak, or either that or it's part of the contract. Hita tamantungo motna. Lo paggu o supportiesti. Sa TODSA award, lo gaiga I appropriation genau. Si Zeus Mosi.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. Any other member wish to speak on the Trelawney Amendment? Any objections on the Trelawney Amendment? Senator Trelawney, would you like to close on your amendment?
So again, as the previous speaker said, this procurement seems to be stuck at DPW since at least November, just on this phase alone. In previous phases, stuck for other reasons, and stuck for years before that for other reasons. But pretty much at DPW since at least November, after a protest, because DPW has not responded to the protest. They haven't answered the company that's protesting. They are waiting for some legislative action to make their actions unprotestable. And that's, I think, what the previous law kind of did. And the sponsor of that law is saying he supports removing that, and I'm glad. It was sponsored by Senator Dueñas, Senator Borja, Senator Lujan, Senator San Augustine, and Senator Ada at the time. But then, these are things that we've just found out. We didn't even know at the time, I don't think, in February 2026, that in September 2025, they had a conditional acceptance of CTI proposal, a letter that we've now been privy to from the governor, from the director, Areola, Swanson at DOE, concurred by the contractor, Cortec, and it says, this conditional acceptance is subject to appropriation. No obligation on the government unless and until the legislature enacts the annual leaseback appropriations and the 2 additional construction appropriations. And so they knew this was exceeding their, the law that authorized leaseback payments. It even exceeded what we put into the budget law, which was a leaseback payment, strictly for leaseback. And it's very concerning that that we are here at this position, and that it doesn't look to be an innocent mistake. It doesn't look to be some I don't even know what to say about it, But I remember when they were making a grand announcement that they were going to make a demolition of the old building, and they called all the people down. We've discovered later that they had a separate contract for that. Something there is no law for. There's only one law, and that authorizes at least back payments, and all these things were going to be included. And again, I'm not part of that. I would like to know more details, but from what we can gather, it looks like when they put out the RFP, everybody should have been on notice of the existing law. Not that the law would be changed in the future. I don't think anybody was given that advanced knowledge that you can come in and try to do anything you want, and we will change the law to match that later on. That's pretty unconscionable. But really what's unconscionable is that the administration continues to blame that there was a protest that is holding this up. And that's a huge problem for me. Now, I don't know the merits of one side or the other, but I do know protests are normally when one company thinks they didn't follow the correct law or they didn't follow the rules. And that's the only way to make a process fair. And to remove these protests or to blame the procurement law that we actually allow protests is a little bit of insanity. It's blaming the only part of our law that requires you to prove that you are acting fairly and in accordance with the law. They want to blame that as the reason for this delay, when they can't even make an answer in regards to this protest since November 2025. Meanwhile, of course, we have students waiting, parents waiting, and it's like they're being used as political toys. It's really sad.
Thank you, Senator.
And really infuriating. So that's my amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing, hearing none, amendment carries. Colleagues, we'll take a 1-minute recess. The committee of the whole is back in order. The next amendment is SSM P174 III. This is a fiscal year appropriation in 27. I'm going to rule it out of order. Colleagues, we're moving on to the next amendment. This amendment is SFP or SB 266 SFP. Looks like it's the same number. Oh, 174 without no three ayes. Just 174. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this amendment does, it includes three special funds in the CRER. So the three funds is the Recycling Revolving Fund, the Health and Human Services Fund, the Youth Tobacco Education Prevention Fund, into the monthly reporting. And so the reason for this is that these funds are not part of the budget. They're not included in the budget, but I believe that they need to there needs to be more transparency and accountability on these funds, considering their importance. So as you know, the Recycling Revolving Fund is used for removal of abandoned vehicles, cleaning up our island in regards to recycling any waste, solid waste. And this has been a fund that has been utilized by the mayors. It's now utilized by DPW to remove abandoned vehicles. The other funds, Health and Human Services Fund and the Youth Tobacco Education Prevention Fund. So the reason why that I'm proposing this is because the Health and Human Services Fund is receiving fees and fines for tobacco control. And so they've increased their they've increased their compliance checks on businesses, and so they've been getting some funding as a result of infractions to selling to minors. And the Youth Tobacco Education Prevention Fund is a special fund for the Guam Behavioral Health. And so one of the issues with these funds is that the agencies that utilize them want to know when the money is coming through. They don't have the reporting. They have not been receiving reporting in regards to the amounts in these funds, which are needed for education, nicotine prevention, any kind of drug prevention, specifically nicotine. And we know that there's a increase, actually Guam has one of the highest rates of youth vape use of all of, in the US too, in fact, and amongst Pacific Islanders. It's so much so that about 30% of our middle schoolers and high schoolers are they're users. And vape use is already being documented in elementary school students. In one of the testimonies provided by the Youth Congress, one of the mothers of the members stated, who was a teacher at an elementary school, found the students in the bathroom vaping. And so these funds are very essential to help prevent, or at least to address this crisis that is occurring. And we know with addiction issues, for those that are young, it affects them, the impact is much more different than adults. It has a long-lasting impact, especially when their brains are still developing. And we want to ensure that, we want to protect our youth from the harms of nicotine, and to ensure that, they have a good path in life, a good start in life, through education, and they should not have to deal with addiction issues. And so that's the importance of these funds, so that the agencies know what to plan for. So it's very difficult when they don't have the funding and to plan for it. And so this would help them, this is a tool that would help them, get ahead and plan to ensure that they're hiring staff, or there's money available to hire additional staff or purchase equipment so they can continue with their prevention and cessation programs. And so that's why I want to include these in the monthly reporting, so these agencies know what to expect and how to plan better. And I ask for my colleagues' support.
On the amendment, on the motion, are there any objections? Would you like to close, Senator?
I just ask for my colleagues' support. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like you have it. Amendment passes. Colleagues, the next amendment is VAB L11 P174, and this is Senator Bora. Senator Bora, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. This amendment, all it's doing is carrying forward the same fiscal accountability requirements we included in last year's budget. We're not asking for anything new, Mr. Chair. We're simply just making sure that the Guam Department of Education continues to tell us clearly and consistently how it plans to spend and manage the money we appropriate. The amendment asks GDOE to submit a fiscal execution plan that they've been doing on time over the last fiscal year, which has helped us kind of keep track and work with them in ensuring that they're spending their money, that's being appropriated. It asks for quarterly reports. It shows us how much has been spent, whether GDOE is meeting their timelines and their targets, and any corrective action or adjustment to ensure that they're in line with what their spend plan looks like. And if GDOE determines it may need or may exceed its appropriation, the superintendent will notify us and the Guam Education Board, and also produce a plan to address the shortfall before schools or students start to fill it. Colleagues, this amendment is something that we've done before, or that we put in the last budget, and I'm asking to implement this. It helps us to keep a close watch, but also it also allows us and forces GDOE to work with us to ensure that they have the funding and support throughout the fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the motion, on the amendment, anyone wish to speak?
So just a quick question.
Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's some verbiage that was left out in 1C.
Do you yield, Senator Bora?
We can get a recess, Mr. Chair, so we can look at that.
1 minute recess. Committee of the Whole is back in order. Senator Bora, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you to my colleague for catching that. The only thing missing from that was action. So if I could amend this amendment to add the word actions and corrective actions.
There is an amendment under on the second page. There's not a line, colleagues, but on what was recognized by Senator Perez, C will read any updated risk assessments and corrective actions, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Any objection to the amendment? No objection. Amendment to the amendment passes. On the amendment, anyone wish to speak? Seeing and hearing none, any objections? You want to close, Senator Boyer? Amendment passes. Next amendment, VAB L11P174II. Senator Boyer, you recognize.
Mr. Chair, for this amendment, can I just put it at the bottom of the list until, I think, because this will, Senator Parkinson's amendment, and we'll address this, which is, because this is asking for a 500K 499, but we're okay if I'll support his amendment.
Do you want to just withdraw it, Senator, if you're not going to proffer this, or you still need to proffer this?
It'll be dependent on Senator Parkinson's amendment if it fails.
Okay, any
motion to
objection
move
to
this to the
set this aside until the Parkinson amendment is disposed of? No objection, it's been set aside. Next amendment is VAB L11P1743. Senator Boyer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. This amendment incorporates Bill 285-38. This measure was requested by Acting Director of the Guam Public Library System to expand eligibility for the permanent director position. I want to thank the Guam Public Library Board and Acting Director Angie Taitui for working with my office to address the gap in this law. The Guam Public Library System has been without a permanent director for some time. The current law is too narrow and limits the pool of qualified applicants, which is why they've asked us to introduce this measure. There are capable individuals on the island with the education, management expertise, and leadership skills necessary to run the library system, but they don't meet the specific library science requirements currently provided in the law. This amendment expands eligibility to individuals with qualifications and experience in areas such as business and admin, public administration, commerce, and information systems. It also recognizes the Certified Public Library Administrator Program, or CPLA, and is another way for an applicant to demonstrate the necessary skills to manage library operations, personnel, technology, facilities, and their finances. This amendment does not lower the standards for the position. It provides the library board with greater flexibility to recruit and select a qualified director who can take on full responsibility of leading the Guam Public Library System. My hope that this amendment will finally allow GPLS to fill this important position and provide stable leadership needed to strengthen library services for our community. And I ask my colleagues for their support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Barnett and then Senator Perez.
Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak on the amendment, which lowers the qualifications for director of the Guam Public Library System. Just a little bit of background. Yes, they have struggled to fill the position, but they actually did have a director previously who met the qualifications of having earned a master's degree in library science, a master's degree in library information science, or a master's degree in education with a concentration in library science from a U.S. accredited college or university, or from a college or university accredited by the American Library Association. But the problem was that this director wasn't a political appointee. And that's kind of why I have an issue with the amendment. I mean, God bless the public library system's heart, but I think that we need individuals who have a background in library sciences. And what this amendment does is it allows for the qualifications for director to meet either A, which I just read, or provided no applicant meets A, they can be a librarian as defined by the library system's minimum knowledge, abilities, and skill qualifications for a library position, and have the proven ability to manage library operations and personnel as demonstrated in one of three ways. So we've actually had a library director who met these qualifications, and he made a lot of significant changes with the library and libraries around the island. And I think, for me, just generally speaking, I'm not sure if this is the solution to the issue that we have with the public library system. And the issue that we have with the public library system is, like many services that are supposed to be available for our people, these services have been cut back, curtailed, shut down in many cases. I was a person who spent a lot of time in the public library system when I was growing up, whether as, in Molesto, of course, the Neves Flores branch. I even spent a lot of time at the University of Guam Library when I stayed in Manila. And unfortunately, because of funding challenges, our library in Agatna is closed one day of the week. And what does that say about our priorities as a government? So, I appreciate the effort of the proffer of the amendment, but it doesn't really do anything to improve the library system. In fact, weakening the qualifications for the director, I think, could be problematic because we want somebody who has the experience and the education in that position. So hopefully they can execute. That's part of it. It's like we did have someone who met the qualifications, but maybe they just didn't know how to play the game. And that's probably why they're not in that position anymore. And we've seen different directors come through. Director Taidagui is doing as good a job as she can do while managing the library and CAHA. So again, just to speak on the state of the public library system, it breaks my heart when we drive by the library, for example, in Piguat Molesto that's been shuttered for, a while. The public library in Barragata had closed down at one point, and then it was determined to be used as a repository for different documents, and now I believe it's open on certain days. But when we talk about being a government that provides services to our people, especially our youth, they would greatly benefit from having a library system that really meets like the basic needs. I mean, I don't know how we can be proud to be doing a budget or be proud to be elected representatives when, the basics a lot of times, whether it's village street repair or keeping a library open 6 days a week. I mean, the fact that we struggle to do these basic things, I think speaks a lot as to how much we're investing in our, not just our people, but our young kids who, libraries really spark that interest and that desire to learn. And when these opportunities aren't available or they're available in a way that's not really meaningful, then I think it's not just the kids and the people who go to the library who suffer. It's us in this hall as well. Mr. Chair.
On the motion, Senator Perez.
Yeah, so question, has this had a public hearing?
Yes, it has.
Okay. Can the proffer of this amendment explain, because I'm looking at subsection C, and to me, they're not equal. I'm just thinking that if we're looking for alternate certifications or qualifications for a director, the subsections in C are not, I don't think necessarily that they are in line with library science.
Does the author yield?
I mean, Mr. Chair, that's one question I'd probably, if, the senator who's proffering the question would have showed up to the public hearing to ask the board and the acting director that question. This was at the request of the acting director and the board for the library, so I'm not going to be able to answer that question.
Senator Perez, that's the answer.
Okay, maybe I can ask further. So what was the rationale for these three subsections?
Does the author yield?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a rush, other than the position.
The question was, what was the rationale?
The rationale.
The rationale to adding these subsections is that to expand the
No, I understand the intent, but the rationale, the reasoning behind these subsections.
Does the author yield?
No, I don't. I'm not sure where she's going with that.
Subject to your interpretation, Senator. May continue?
Okay, so it's not clear. To me, they're not equal. These subsections are not equal. And to say that a managerial experience of 4 years equals a library science knowledge or having a bachelor's or master's degree in business administration aligns with library science. So I think, I guess my question is, although they do want to expand the pool, I think they've gone too far, is my concern. They've gone too far as expanding the pool. I mean, I think there should be a happy medium when it comes to these subsections. If anything, I would have agreed with subsection double I or 2. But then when it comes down to now education, right? What is the educational background? And so instead of maybe an or for some of these, it could have been an and, perhaps the second one and the third one could be an and yeah, I feel like it could have been rearranged better, this one. But yeah, again, I guess my concern is that we're shifting away from the intent of a director or the background, the expertise of what a director should have for the Guam Public Library System. And, I think this is an important agency if we want to address early childhood literacy. I think there were a lot of programs under the previous director, a lot of public engagement, community engagement when it came to literacy. And I hear that there's really a drop in that. There was a lot of innovation in regards to online access to books. And so I think, yeah, if we're going to lower the standards, it's just going to impact our community. And we know a lot of our colleagues grew up in the libraries, right? And we want to encourage that same environment for our younger generation, and to lower the standards. I think, I think there should be some more, question. I question this particular amendment.
Are you done, Senator?
Yeah, I just raised concerns about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On the motion, on the amendment, Senator Kumitato, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did attend the public hearing for this particular amendment, and I noted then that they had been without a qualified librarian for the last 17 months. And for the period between February 2006 and May 2021, or 15 years prior to 2024. We asked on the record about, have they ever had a summit? They haven't had a summit, a library summit, to talk about the expansion, or how do we create the means to grow the field. They haven't had one of those since the 1970s. In an attempt to try to find a way, Mr. Chair, that they can build a workforce or find ways to support our library system. And one other thing I think that jumped out at me and why the amendment becomes more important: total visits between 2021 and 2023 to the libraries that my colleagues mentioned earlier. Just in those years, 26,483 visits in FY 2023, which was up from 15,997 in FY 2022 and 7,412 in FY 2021. Mr. Chair, we're trying to help the public library system. They were very blunt in their assessment. They're just trying their very best. The challenges, I've been there to try to help understand how do we get the right person or get the librarian with that skills. Man, it's taken, Mr. Chair, over 20 years to have folks that can actually qualify, but it still remains a challenge. So this is a good amendment, Mr. Chair, that I believe will in fact help the public library system, and I ask my colleagues to support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment, on the motion, anybody else? Senator San Augustine, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It just amazes me. They talk about the different libraries in the villages. And yes, at my age, I did go to the library and did it too. Many of you, I don't know what library you went to, but I'd like to ask the author of the amendment, what is the position at the village libraries? Are they a librarian? Do they have to meet all the same requirements? Because a librarian as a director should be higher. But, por favor, what do we have at the villages? With the oversight chair, can please tell us that? I appreciate it.
Does the author yield?
Mr. Chair, some of them say they prefer a technician, but usually they have volunteers that really run these, or the staff of the mayor's office. I know Barragata, talking to my mayor, even the Barragata mayor, the library there, when they do open it, it's usually, if a technician or somebody from a PC from the main library comes down to help, but for the most part, the villages would help. So usually a volunteer, Mr. Chair.
So there's really not a, like we seem to be flexing that it's the critical part of a child's development. Yes, good, give them an opportunity to read. But even in our body, got some thoughts that not everybody's got a degree doesn't mean that they're not smart enough. So I'm going to move on that one, and I'm just going to support this because I know I've seen it through the library, the director position. You got some good people show up, and then you got some good folks that can do the job. They just don't meet the probably letter B, but they meet triple I. In most jobs there's a plenty or equivalent, and that's how we've been able to fill it. If we had so many qualified people in Guam, this wouldn't be an issue. And if the concern is as such, it should have been addressed during that public hearing. At this point, I stand in support of this amendment, and we just move on. Seem to be dragging something that don't need to be discussed further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the motion, on the amendment, anyone else wish to speak? Seeing and hearing none, you want to close, Senator? Are there any objections to the motion? Motion carries. Senators, we are on the next amendment, VAB L11 P174 4. Senator Boyer, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues again. This amendment is incorporating Bill 288-38, which allows government of Guam employees to use excess annual leave until September 30, 2027. Bill 288, which had already received a public hearing, has gone through the committee process. Rather than allowing this issue to remain unresolved, this amendment gives government of Guam employees a clear opportunity to use the annual leave they have already earned. If not, employees will lose all their accumulated annual leave according to the law. Specifically, this amendment allows employees throughout the government of Guam, including light agencies, autonomous agencies, to utilize annual leave accumulated above the statutory carryover limit through September 30, 2027. This amendment does not provide employees with additional annual leave, and it doesn't authorize a cash payout for excess leave. It simply provides employees more time to use the leave they have already earned before those hours may be lost. This provision will remain in effect until September 30, 2027. And I ask my colleagues for their support, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the author would, I'm looking at the amendment. Does it allow anything beyond 100 hours to be transferred to sick leave, other than what is said in the beginning of the amendment?
Will the author yield?
Mr. Chair, it doesn't. All this is doing is allowing, extending the time limit.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking that, Mr. Chairman, is because on some agencies they won't be able to afford to allow their employees to take that much leave. If they got like 5 or 6 or 7 or even 1,000 hours. And I have an amendment that I'm going to introduce to the amendment. Just waiting for my staff, if we can get a minute so I can follow up where it's at. But it's to allow the employee to transfer any amount they want to transfer to sick leave, because sick leave leads to retirement. If they can't take the leave, but they want to increase the opportunity to retire early, let them take it. And let them keep at 320, because if they can't get it, they can't exhaust it all by September 30, 2027, at least there's a way to dispose of it and not lose it. Kind of like the word use it or lose it. No, 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 no. Those are hard-earned hours. And if we can get a minute so I can follow up on the amendments, so I can get it to the floor, I appreciate it.
We are in recess. The committee of the whole is back in order. Senator Snuggles, do you still have the floor? You have an amendment to the amendment?
I sure do, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues, if you look at the amendment, it starts out with notwithstanding any provisions of law. You find on the, I would assume that was page 3. The original amendment allows you to carry over limit on before September 30th. I'm requesting that we allow you as the employee the ability to transfer all in excess of 320 on or before 2027. You either use it or lose it. So I would say the best option would be allow them to transfer all that leave to sick leave. It'll be their option. And if they don't do it by September 30th, 2027, use it or move it, you lose it. That's where we end up at. And it goes back from originally when the law first started on October 1st, 2025, on the carryover limit. So that's basically it.
On the amendment to the amendment, anyone wish to speak? On the amendment to the amendment, Senator Terlaje, you recognize.
This is a big change, and I'm just I'm trying to remember, you know, what DOA said about the fiscal impacts of the original bill. But with this change, I feel like, of course, we're not going to see it immediately. We're going to see it at their retirement. But I don't know what the fiscal impact is. That maybe if the sponsor would yield.
Senator Duncan, you yield to that?
I think the question is, what's the financial impact?
Yes, what's the fiscal impact?
Well, number one, it's already paid for. It's hours that you earn. There's already money in the bank. You send it to retirement. If you choose to. If not, if you perceive or actually anticipate you may be sick, you would be able to use it on sick leave. So whatever financial impact, there shouldn't be any. But if you lose it, of course, the government saves money, but the employee loses. That's the reason for this amendment, so the employee does not lose.
Yeah. Senator, when our committee is contemplating the other two bills, which we're going to hear in August, on this, because I believe Senator Parkinson has a similar amendment, but this is all of it, it really is the actuarial. Because the truth is, it's actually a better fiscal impact to the general fund because you're not cashing out that leave. You're actually gaining more years, which may skew the actuarial on retirement, but that's really where it lies. Whether or not, you know, the eligibility, not necessarily always just the eligibility. It could mean somebody with 23 years now has 25 years if they add 2 years of sick leave, or say, for example, they're 30 years fully vested, they get 2 more years, that would mean their annuity would go up. But actually, general fund impact, this one, unless it can be proven otherwise, really has no general fund impact because instead of cashing this out, actually you're increasing your retirement benefits by increasing your years of service or getting to once again, the premium years of service. If you have 28 years and you got 2 years of leave, boom, now you're 30 years. So back in the napkin, like some of our friends like to say, fiscal impact actually not on the general fund, but on the actuarial, we have to ask Paula if that skews it. But I think if the policy goes into place, in my opinion, we can work with them on it, but that's a decision of the body.
Well, I'm just remembering this headline when they testified on the original bill about the millions of dollars impact. And I just like to, it seemed to me that they had not finished their own deliberations on this because they say some employees have over 2,000 hours accumulated, which would have a year's annual salary paid out all at once potentially. And they talk about law enforcement salaries could reach over 100,000. I don't know, this is a budget bill, I just feel like we need to know the physical impact, even to the retirement fund, if any. And if we could just pass this on file until we can get some of those answers, or like if OB can give us what the retirement's response to this is.
I can tell you that as the chair, we have not asked retirement at this time.
I know,
But
that's
like I
because
said,
this bill is, these provisions are totally new.
Yeah.
It was not even considered
But
in the
once
public
again,
hearing
on
that the
fiscal
original bill had.
Senator, on fiscal impact, all the representations were on other legislation, or if the agencies had to pay, had to cash that out at those hours, that would be a huge fiscal impact. But this is punting it to retirement.
Yes, and I want to know, how does that affect everybody's retirement? I
Your
just want to, I think we need to be just a little responsible to know that, because it says, you know, the article I'm reading says that he mentioned it at the hearing, but there was no response as to what would be. I don't want to jeopardize the system without knowing what exactly. And I agree. I mean, I don't have any objection to any of these provisions, whether they, but I just think we have to know what we're acting on, what the impact's going to be, not just to the individual employees, but to the retirement fund.
Yeah, noted. Do you have a motion?
For a recess?
No, we're going to continue on.
Well, that's how we would get the information from the retirement fund.
Yeah, if you have a motion to not entertain this, that's what I'll entertain at this time.
Can we put it to the bottom?
We're going to entertain it at this time.
Can we just move to put this amendment?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I know that sick leave, there's no, it's not like annual leave where you cash it out towards the end. And when we talked through with DOA, even, at the beginning in regards to our attempt or this bill, sick leave, it's not like annual leave where you can accumulate it and then cash it out. And so if that answers your question in regards to having this being transferred over to sick leave.
Senator Talal, you still have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's the issue. So the public hearing, they talked about allowing them to use their excess annual leave that they had accrued in excess of the statute. And they gave them a year to use that annual leave. And they told the agencies to allow them to use it. This amendment to that amendment is very different. It says you can use all your annual leave. You have a year to use it all, the excess, or you're going to transfer all of it or a portion of it to sick leave. Convert it to sick leave and transfer it to the retirement fund. So yes, of course, we're not going to pay for that immediately, but I just want to know our future generation is going to be paying for that in a different way. And if it's nominal, then I wouldn't object. But if it significantly impacts the retirement fund, then I would like to know. And I don't think there's any testimony anywhere that talks about that. And so that's the only reason either we ask them right now or that's why I was just, I just want to be responsible when we're acting on this. And of course, everybody wants to take care of their employees and allow them to do something with their retirement. So I just want to know, if we allow this, are we jeopardizing in the long run any part of this retirement system for everybody, not just these few employees, but everyone. But of course, it's nice for us in here because we're not going to feel that impact. We're just going to push it down to the future and have the retirement fund maybe change, the way they do things to accommodate this. I just don't know, because if I could just get a 5-minute recess, I'm just going to look in the fiscal notes if there's anything that contemplated anything like this. I just don't see it. I'm not seeing it in the news reports or anywhere else, and so we're acting kind of blindly. I just like to see the impact to the retirement fund. I think we have to be very careful impacting our retirement fund because it took us so long to get it to where it's at today.
we'll continue deliberation on the amendment. Are you done?
Yeah. My motion to recess for 5 minutes.
Not granted. We're going to continue to discuss this.
I think you need a vote.
Yeah. And on that motion to recess, all in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails. We'll continue.
Was there an objection to that recess?
Yes, I ruled that we're going to continue discussion. On the motion, anyone else wish to speak on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, Senator Parkinson, you may be recognized on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in support of this amendment.
Sorry, did we vote on that last amendment?
Yes, we voted
On the amendment to the amendment?
Well, no, we're still on the amendment to the amendment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
They voted on the recess.
on the recess, correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in support of this amendment to the amendment. The situation, you know, was unfortunate through no fault of the own of the employees. They were working under the best practices, and in particular, I like the Part B that allows for the transfer of all or a portion of the employee's annual leave accumulated to sick leave. I had proffered a bill that basically proposed just that because I believe that that was the best way to solve this problem without really negatively impacting the day-to-day operations and putting people through unnecessary hardships. Because, you know, even if we allowed people to burn up all that leave, you know, there are some people with an incredible amount of leave, and, you know, I just imagine having so many workers in mass burden through their leave, and at what point does that start to affect government services? And so I think this is a good compromise so that, you know, people who want to use that leave, they can use that leave within reason. And for everybody else, let's get it over to sick leave so that nobody is burned by this in the long run. You know, everybody is eventually going to be made whole through the retirement process. And because, you know, there are some people who really save up this time to do something special with it. And just to think that it could all go to waste, that is just, it's just a great injustice to whoever it happens to. And so, no, I thank the proffer of this amendment for putting this in, and I support it and ask my colleagues to support it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. On the amendment to the Borja amendment, Senator Perez, you recognize.
Yes, thank you. This amendment seems to be out of order because they made some changes and didn't do a double underline. On the first page, it states, it adds, as of February 28, 2003. So what that means to me is that it's treating the retirees differently, that those that have earned their annual leave as of February 28, 2003 may carry it over. But what about those after that date? So if the proffer of this amendment to the amendment can provide clarification on what the meaning of that section, and you know, again, it wasn't double underlined to show that there was a change from the initial amendment.
Does the proffer of the amendment yield?
Mr. Chairman, okay. On the top of that page, as you mentioned, 2003, but if you look at the introduced amendment, it refers for when the carryover limit started. That's all we're referring to is when it started. It said that in 2025, 320, anything beyond that, use it or lose it. That's what we're referring to. Now, if the speaker would like to add up to 2003, that'd be great too.
No,
But it was
sorry, your
referring to
amendment,
2025.
sorry, your amendment states that. I'm not adding it. Your amendment has that language in there.
The amendment talks about 2025. Not to, it only, when you look at the 2003 portion, that's just repeating what's in statute. It doesn't say change it. It doesn't underline or anything. So I'm trying to read where you're reading. Because what we struck out says notwithstanding any provisions, a bunch of stuff struck out. Yes, and there's a double line. I was asked that by legal. I said, doesn't matter because we struck it out. And it jumped to the next page, which is the last page. Notwithstanding any provisions of law, all employees of Guam, and it goes so forth, who accumulated annual leave in excess of statutory carryover limit prior to October 2025 shall or on before December 2020 choose one of the following options.
That's correct. Everything on page 1 is original language. Starting with section 3 is where the senator has done his double underline and his strike through.
Sorry, there's a
And then double
miscommunication.
underline on the other rest.
Yeah,
of
there's a
it.
miscommunication on the very first page, number 1. So if you look at the initial amendment, right, and compare it to the amendment, there's an area that's not double underlined that should be double underlined.
Hey,
So if you look at the, under employees entitled, so if you look at the original amendment, it states employees entitled to annual leave hereunder may accumulate up to 320 hours, and any annual leave earned by eligible employees in excess of 320 hours shall be credited to such employees' accumulated sick leave, provided that no more than 100 hours shall be credited to sick leave, and it goes on. So the language that is added, that's not double underlined in the amendment to amendment. So if you look at the very second sentence, so it adds a phrase. It says, as of February 28, 2003. So was that meant to be there, or should that be taken out?
Does the author yield? Let's take a recess to do some comparison and make sure that
Mr. Chair,
is correct. Yes.
can I just move to bump this to the bottom so that I know some of my other colleagues have also want to ensure that the retirement question that came up gets addressed. So can we move this? Can I make a motion to move this to the bottom so that those things can be answered?
Motion to move the amendment to the bottom of the stack. Any objection? So ordered. Your amendment to the amendment will be intact, but make sure that it's correct in terms of how it's been proffered. Motion carries. So move that to the bottom. Colleagues, we are on the next amendment. This is WAP L10 P174. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is the to repeal of the autonomous agency collections, correct?
Yes, Senator.
All right. This amendment is based on Bill 194-38, and this repeals a law created in 1985 that requires the Guam Power Authority, the Port Authority of Guam, and the AP Wonpat International Airport to collectively transfer $3.5 million per year from their operating surpluses to the general fund. The payment was intended to function like a payment in lieu of taxes because these agencies benefit from government services such as police and fire protection, roads, and other public infrastructure. The law also prohibited any transfer that would violate an agency's existing bond covenants. The system never really worked as intended, despite the best of intentions. And GPA never paid into the fund. GIAA made no transfer, and the port was the only agency that ever contributed. The Office of Public Accountability found little to no activity through the fund's history and recommended repeal and audits issued in 2004, 2006, 2019, and again in 2022. No statutory mechanism ever successfully produced the full $3.5 million annual transfer. The 2022 audit recommendation was listed as open in September 2025, and Bill 194, this current amendment before us, was introduced on September 24, 2025 to finally address the recommendation by closing the inactive fund and aligning the Guam Code with actual government practice. For approximately 40 years, the law promised an annual $3.5 million transfer that was never successfully implemented. Keeping the inactive requirements on the books creates the appearance that Guam has a reliable revenue source when it does not. OPA reviewed the fund multiple times and found that legal restrictions, bond covenants, rate-pay concerns, and other constraints made the transfer system unworkable. The repeal is based on documented audits rather than a political decision to excuse the agencies from an active obligation. GIAA warned that diverting airport revenue could conflict with federal requirements and its bond agreements. GPA's proposed payment arrangements depend on a surcharge that could ultimately be recovered from power customers, and the law was not producing free revenue. Attempting to enforce it could shift costs to ratepayers or create financial and legal complications for the agencies. This amendment would support the current budget primarily by improving the accuracy and the credibility rather than by generating additional money. The current bill identifies revenues supporting the 2027 appropriation, including taxes, federal sources, licenses and fees, and department charges and special funds. It does not identify a separate $3.5 million autonomous agency collection fund transfer as part of its 2027 revenue. Repealing the obsolete law would therefore align the Guam Code with the revenue assumptions already reflected in the substitute budget. The repeal would also remove uncertainty over whether GPA, the port, and GIAA continue to carry a dormant statutory obligation that could be raised against their operating surpluses. Those agencies could plan their FY 2027 operations without an outdated $3.5 million mandated hanging over their finances. This does not provide the general fund with new revenue, but it reduces the risk of building future budgets around money that cannot realistically or be legally collected. We still maintain oversight over autonomous agencies, and it would require autonomous agencies to pay the costs of their respective annual audits and require monthly reports dealing their revenues and expenditures. This amendment can therefore be presented as removing an ineffective collection mechanism while preserving the financial reporting and accountability. This amendment strengthens and looking at the fiscal impact, BBMR entered a zero estimated fiscal impact for FY 2025 through FY 2029 and described the repeal as administrative because the fund has been inactive. However, BBMR also stated that could not conclusively determine the fiscal impact because the Department of Administration did not provide comment confirming whether any cash balances remain associated with the funds. I'm out of time, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Finish up on your close. On the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Tataguy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some questions for the author of the amendment, if you should yield. And that is the funds, the plan is to just get rid of this law, you know, and no longer require these individual agencies to provide the funding needed for not having to pay taxes. 3 funds, is it 3.5 each that they have to put into this collection fund?
Does the author
Agency
yield?
collection fund? Yeah. 3.5, sorry.
I believe it's a collective 3.5 million.
Okay, so between the three then, it's divided in, 3.5 is divided into three.
That's how I understand it, unless I misread the statute, but that's how I understand it as well.
Okay. And my next question, Mr. Chair, if I may ask, what is this fund used for once it's collected? What is it used for?
Does the author yield? We need your mic on, sir.
Yeah, sure, I'll yield to that. The payment was intended to function like a payment in lieu of taxes. So this is money that is going to the general fund to be appropriated as we see fit. But because no one has ever really paid for it and we've never made our budget assumptions based on this law at all, even our current budget does not contemplate this at all, it would be a cleaner solution to just remove this law that has never been properly done or enforced or moved on, and let's just deal with the reality of how we've been doing this for the last several years. Otherwise, you know, if we are to bring this back from the dead, who knows what kind of impacts that could have and whether we could actually fully enforceably collect the full 3.5 million.
Thank you to the author for that, but you know, it reminds me of a couple other bills that we've implemented, especially I have one myself by the Guam Housing Corporation, and it was passed almost 4 years ago, and it still has not been implemented. You know, the problem I think with the bills that we, you know, pass by this body, there's just no teeth to it to get these agencies to do what we think that's in the best interest. I don't know about you, but $3.5 million at the end of the year can fund a lot of critical areas, big time areas. Hopefully it takes a governor that comes into office who knows about this bill and this law, not bill, but knows about this law that has been neglected except by one agency. Do you think it's fair that for years one agency has been paying on it and these guys have been left behind? If anything, Mr. Chair, I'd introduce legislation to require these two agencies who have failed to put this money in based on law that was passed by this body, to have them, you know, make it retro, find out how much they have been sitting back. It says since 1983, if I'm not mistaken, that's what the author said, that this bill has been implemented since 1985. Wow, that's a lot of money, but I'm pretty sure when it first started, they were complying to it, and then I guess they just decided not to do it. But is that what we're going to do with bills that this body passes? Okay, well, we put a law together, and now this director who wants to make a decision not to follow the law, it's okay. In fact, we'll just get rid of the law. There was a reason why this law was put into place. Autonomous agencies, the Port Authority, if you look at their portfolio, you'll find out they do have funds that it's a drop in the bucket for 1,166,666, because that's what is divided between, you know, from 3.5 million divided 3 agencies. It's not getting rid of the law that we should be doing here. It's creating additional legislation that puts the fire to these directors' feet to follow the law. What makes them think that they don't have to follow the law? We have legislation, or we have laws right now currently that require CRE report to be with us by the end of every 21st of the month, the CRER report. And in the event the BBMR director does not provide it to us, he will be fined. We have another law that states the Attorney General has a certain amount of time to provide anybody in this body with any question that they seek from the Attorney General, that if he does not comply, he's also fined. And guess what? I don't think any of them broke the law. They're following through with that law. Because I believe it's $1,000 they would have to pay out of their own personal pocket, not out of the agency, their own personal pocket. Now, I tried to introduce legislation on the ARC that if directors do not follow through, that these businesses who've been sitting and waiting to get their permits for months and months, which is costing them so much money, that these agencies will be fined. It passed this body. The bill passed this body, but unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. I guess she doesn't want her directors to be accountable to the law, and having to pay out of their own pocket. If you ask me, they make quite a bit of money. So I have to respectfully object to this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Chalaw, you're recognized.
Again, this may or may not be a good policy to remove, but I really, really object to removing it in this fashion without a bill, without a public hearing, without really fleshing out the facts and any potential impacts that might occur. These laws were, yes, they've been on the books a long time, some of them pre-existing bonds. So I think we need a public hearing. I think we should see the fiscal notes. The sponsor himself said he's not sure what might be in the fund or not. And I just think that's a very bare minimum. And if it's good, it'll pass. But in doing that today without a bill or a public hearing, when we're talking about $3.5 million since he says in the 80s, can we at least just have a public hearing and let's flesh this out? This is not, it was not just a, out of the blue demand on these agencies. It was in lieu of assessing them the actual levy of real estate taxes. So is there a proposal now that we're going to go back and collect real estate taxes since we weren't able to collect this? We've exempted them from all kinds of things, maybe because of this. Previous legislatures did that. But I think we just should have a very clear picture. If we're going to continue to exempt them, if we're not going to receive payment in lieu of taxes, I just think that's all of the things that the public, they are worthy of us being truly informed of all the implications. And if it's a policy we're going to change, and what about the other side of this policy? It says, that this policy that they passed would be more equitable and fair than assessing the real estate taxes on these autonomous agencies. And as you know, we have, not we, but the people of Guam, taxpayers, landowners, they have given their property, they have given their assets, our resources, to these agencies to manage for us. They've given waivers of apparently real estate taxes, and many, many more things. We have these agencies charging customs to use the land and the building that the taxpayers built. So I would just ask again, bare minimum, that we honor the existing law, 2 GCA 2108, that says if we're going to pass things in our budget that have never had a public hearing, that we make a bill, we have a public hearing, and then we can do whatever we want with it. Just so we give everybody the opportunity to tell us all sides. I think that's only fair, and we're talking about a lot of money here. And it's just, as he said, there's no risk in this being on the books. There's no risk in having a hearing to remove it from the books. There's no risk in that. That would be the safest, the most honorable, the most legal, the most fiscally sound. We can know the fiscal impacts. We could actually get a fiscal note on that bill. We could probably hear from our community, who's very smart, other ways to achieve the same purpose. Instead of just wiping it off the books today and potentially impacting our long-term ability to do anything. I just think that we're cutting our choices down at a time that we should not, and we should just have a hearing, and let's hear it out.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion.
So on that, again, I would raise a point of order that we really need a public hearing on this, and the 2 GCA, the law that the previous legislatures have passed, that we are bound by, unless we waive that law requires a public hearing, and this one has not had one. And it should be ruled out of order, Mr. Chair.
Currently in the provisions, and it's being struck in provisions, I rule that it's eligible.
There is, Mr. Chair, on point of order, there's no exception in that law for something in provisions or different parts of the bill. It says anything in the budget bill should have had a public hearing.
Are you moving to remove the amendment?
Well, I'm using a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay, are you overruling the chair's decision?
Yeah, I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
On the motion to overrule the chair's decision, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails. That's your time, Senator. Anyone else on the motion? Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think I would like to concur with the retiring speaker's sentiments that, again, I feel that because there wasn't a bill that was proffered in this term and that didn't have a public hearing, it's really, it does not comply with our laws. And, I think if I can recall, some of the statements regarding, any impacts to, sorry. Yeah, I just think that, if this section is repealed, what are the potential impacts to, I guess, the operations for one, and I think that I just have a sense that this law should not be repealed because it does provide a public benefit. The public benefit that would help to keep in check surpluses. So as you know, some of the surpluses are used to increase executive pay raises or increase the pay raises for the executives. And, I think this kind of holds some sort of accountability. There's an accountability measure by keeping this in law because there is a responsibility, a duty for those funds to go back to the general fund to help fund whatever is deemed necessary. And I believe that at the time that this law was made, land was given up. Land was given up to some of these agencies. And in return for that, they were obligated to reciprocate some sort of payment. And I don't think that, I think that's part of the bargain. If land was provided or some other assets were provided that belonged to the people of Guam. And so that's why I think we really should have a hearing. There should be a bill that should have been introduced and a hearing to really look at the history of this particular part of law and to give us some sort of ability to make that decision on the best data and the best evidence. Otherwise, we are acting blindly. I think one of the, when we think about Chamorro society, we've existed for over 3,500 years. And the reason for that is that we are able to adapt to our environment. And so I guess the question is, by repealing this part of law, does it give us more resiliency or less? And my intuition says less. But again, we don't have the public to weigh in on these things. And that is what we as a body, that's our responsibility, is to bring in the public. Let's hear the pros and the cons and make the decisions on the best available evidence and data. This is something that I take seriously, rather than try to slip in a provision and then find out the repercussions afterwards. Unless this body has different ideas about how we pass policies. And that's why I object to moving forward with this amendment. I think, we haven't done our due diligence. We probably we're not even honoring the past agreements. So yeah, I object to this amendment. Mrs. Mossy.
On the amendment, Senator Montanani, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although I haven't made up my mind on where I stand on this particular amendment, I just wanted to point out when we talk about the public, the Office of Public Accountability, and I believe the mover of this amendment mentioned it, produced an audit on this particular fund, and I remember it because I was in the media, and it was something that I think we covered. And that audit on the Autonomous Agency Collections Fund found that the Special Revenue Fund was not being utilized in accordance with its originally intended purpose. The AACF was created in 1985 as a transfer policy, or payment in lieu of taxes for the Guam Power Authority, et cetera, as the author had mentioned. The three agencies were required to transfer a proportioned contribution of the aggregate sum of $3.5 million annually to the general fund. Our audit revealed little to no activity since the fund's inception. And so even when you go through this particular audit, which is on the OPA's website, which is available for the public to read and do the research, this was actually a recommendation by the Office of Public Accountability to repeal this law. So that's just information that the public can go to read if they want to get some background on this particular fund. Again, it's available on a website and it's public, so thank you.
On the amendment, anybody else wish to speak? Seeing and hearing none, the author may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Man, if there's anything that feels so indicative of the problems with government, is here we are arguing about the integrity of this provision that has never once been ever enforced. 1985, I mean, since its inception, this fund has never been used properly, never been budgeted properly, and it has been recommended several times by the OPA. I said the dates, and I believe it was 2004, 2006, 2019, and again in 2022. I didn't come up with this idea because I was bored one day. I listened to the recommendations of the people we're supposed to be working and cooperating with. And, you know, if the question is this, you know, and there's a real conversation to be had. These funds were supposed to be transferred in lieu of assessing taxes because we need revenues to maintain these public services. And if they're not paying this, these transfers, then, you know, maybe we should have a conversation about what revenue expectations we have from these autonomous agencies. I made it a point of mine when I got into public office to clean the books of all these dead laws that we have. Because we have a lot of dead laws. I think I was able to get like 8 or 10 of them last time, just cleaning the books off. And there's more. There's more of them. There have been boards, there are commissions, there are all sorts of things where we have them on the books, but they have never been impaneled, never been enforced, not once. And this is right up in that vein. What a lot of what we do in this body is we are editors of the Guam laws. We edit that book. We are one big nerdy group fest for editing the Guam laws to make it better. And this is one of those laws that need to be cut because it puts these weird obligations in the books that people don't know, should we enforce them or should we not enforce them? If we don't remove this today, we're going to have the same question next year, going to have the same auditors say we need to repeal this law next year, and all of us sitting here wondering, I wonder what the best thing to do is. I wonder if somebody would make a recommendation for us. Oh, no one at all? No one? No, we have recommendations that have been repeated over and over and over and over again, and we are not listening. So, you know, I understand if the body wants to keep this dead law in the books that we've never enforced. That is the right of the body. I understand that. You know, this is one big group project. And if we want to keep this on the books because we don't want to erase something that was made before I was born that's never been enforced, fine. I can understand a little bit of caution. But this feels a little ridiculous. So I leave it up to the will of the body whether we want to keep dead books like this on the law, or do we want to use the opportunities we have to clean them up, or if we want to go back and have a public hearing. I'm open to any and all of them, but man, it is quite the epiphany to hear that, like, when you try to clean up the books for the government of Guam, you would be surprised what comes out of the woodwork saying that, hey, that commission that's never been touched, well, don't touch it now because maybe in a few years we might touch it again. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? So I hope we could have a little bit of common sense to repeal a law that's never been properly enforced in not just my time, but in my father's time, in your father's time, and for some people in here in their grandparents' time. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Yes, there is one way to clean the books of the Guam Code annotated, and that is by writing a bill, having a public hearing according to the open government law, and passing that bill.
Thank you, Senator.
This is an illegal way to do that. And the reason why previous legislatures, including maybe his father, didn't do it, we should examine. We should absolutely find out why didn't all those legislatures who had that opportunity did not avail of it.
Not a point of order. Thank you. On the motion, there has been an objection. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion carries. Colleagues, the next amendment, SSM TMB P174, this continuing appropriations, we have not allowed that in the budget, so rule it out of order. But there's another amendment coming up, I believe, that's going to take care of this. So that's out of order. Senators, at this time, we will take a recess, and we will come back tomorrow morning at 0830. We are in recess.